Up next in the broadcast, Seoul wants actions and not words from Pyongyang as the Unification Ministry rejects North Korea's proposal to stop mudslinging in exchange for the cancellation of joint Korea-U.S. military drills. In an unprecedented move, the U.S. Congress passes legislation tied to its spending bill that urges Japan to address and apologize for its wartime sexual slavery. And President Park Geun-hye and her Indian counterpart Manmohan Singh agreed to fast-track a bolder trade pact, while Korea's delegation makes inroads to merge the two countries' IT sectors. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Friday, January 17th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin overseas, where President Park Geun-hye, on the last full day of her state visit to India, pushed ahead with her sales diplomacy on Friday. A
meeting with Korean and Indian businessmen, she emphasized the importance of converging Korea's hardware and India's software. Our presidential office correspondent Eoh Jin-joo sends us this report from New Delhi.
The trade volume between Korea and India has surged more than 1,400 times since the two nations established diplomatic ties in 1973. But President Park says this is only the beginning. During a Korea-India business forum on Friday, President Park pointed to three ways to further boost the two nations' economic cooperation: cooperating in the sector of the creative economy, expanding cooperation to small and mid-sized firms, and upgrading the Korea-India Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. President Park said putting India's content and software know-how together with Korea's commercialization skills would allow the two countries to create synergy in new sectors. She also stressed that investments, which were until now mainly made by conglomerates, should now be expanded to SMEs.
이제 이러한 양국 간 투자 협력이 중소기업에까지 확산된다면 양국 간 경제 협력이 더욱 균형 있고 내실 있게 발전할 것입니다.
Raising the level of trade liberalization in the Korea-India CEPA was another point of emphasis. Earlier in the day, President Park attended an IT market expo, which aims to lay the path for Korean companies to enter the Indian market.
원래 늦게 되는데 대통령님 오신다 그래서 바로 오늘 계약을 해서 너무 감사드립니다.
저도 아주 오자마자 기쁜 소식을 들어서 너무 좋습니다.
She also met with Korean and Indian experts and businessmen engaged in the IT and software sectors and emphasized the need to converge Korea's, quote, hardware and India's software.
양국의 ICT 산업이 창의적 협력 모델을 만들 수 있다면 지금의 한계와 도전을 극복하고 다시 한번 세계 시장을 선도하는 기회가 열리게 될 것이라고 봅니다.
President Park secured a promise from the chairman of India's Mahindra Group to further expand its investment in Korea. Mahindra & Mahindra owns more than 70% of Korean automaker Ssangyong Motors shares. President Park will head over to Switzerland on Saturday, where she will seek to boost cooperation with the European country, which is strong in science and technology and vocational training, and is known for its economic system centered around small and mid-sized firms. Eoh Jin-joo, Arirang News, New Delhi.
And staying in India, Arirang TV has signed an MOU with an Indian public service broadcaster.
Under the deal, the two sides hope to promote a mutual exchange of programs and cultural ties between the two nations. Arirang's Park Geun-hye has the details on the partnership.
Arirang TV, Korea's only global television network, has signed an MOU with Indian public broadcaster Doordarshan, blazing a new trail for the exchange of content. The CEOs from the two stations met in New Delhi on Friday and agreed to an exchange that will foster cultural ties between Korea and India.
Through this exchange of broadcasting and broadcasters, that we can jumpstart this cultural exchange between two very strong, culturally rich countries.
Korea's Minister of Science, ICT and Future Planning Choi Moon-gi also took part in the event to celebrate the MOU. Under the agreement, Arirang and Doordarshan aimed to make their global channels available on satellite providers in both nations by 2014.
I think Arirang will provide a platform for Indian viewers to be able to take a look at the larger profile of Korea as a nation.
While the MOU was being signed, a documentary produced by Arirang TV was being aired on Doordarshan throughout India. The documentary explains the vision for the so-called creative economy, which Korean President Park Geun-hye has advocated since the very beginning of her term last February. Doordarshan is one of the largest broadcasting organizations in India, with more than 90% of the Indian population having access to the station's programming. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Moving now to inter-Korean relations, South Korea rejected North Korea's call to scrap annual drills with the United States.
Seoul added that the reclusive state should start showing sincerity through its actions and not just with words. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Park Geun-hye reports.
South Korea rebuffed on Friday North Korea's proposal to stop the cross-border mudslinging, saying the North should find concrete ways to demonstrate its sincerity if it wants to improve inter-Korean relations.
It is North Korea that has continued to slander us despite an earlier inter-Korean agreement not to use slander. The North must remember that trust between the two Koreas will be built through action, not words.
In what it called an important proposal Thursday, the North's National Defense Commission offered to initiate steps to ease tensions between the two Koreas if Seoul called off its annual military exercises with Washington that take place in early spring. Seoul reiterated the regular exercises will continue as long as the North poses a threat to the South.
Our military drills are annual defensive training exercises carried out by a sovereign state, and we officially notified neighboring countries, including North Korea, every year, as is the international custom.
Seoul said Pyongyang must take practical steps towards denuclearization to secure peace on the Korean peninsula, and called for a swift resumption of family reunions for those separated since the Korean War, which it said would be a first step toward friendlier inter-Korean ties. Experts say that with the rejection, relations between the two Koreas will be on thin ice, at least for now. South Korea remains wary of any new conciliatory gestures by the North. Just last year, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un proposed better inter-Korean ties in his New Year's Day speech, but followed that with a third nuclear test a month later. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And it looks like Japan is coming under greater international pressure to acknowledge its wartime atrocities.
Over in Washington, the U.S. Senate approved a spending bill Thursday that urges Tokyo to apologize for its sexual enslavement of women during World War II. Our Han Da-eun has more.
The U.S. Senate, for the first time in the history of U.S. legislation, has included the issue of the so-called comfort women in its spending bill. On Thursday local time, the Senate passed a bill that calls on the Japanese government to stick to a 2007 resolution which urged Tokyo to issue an official apology for its wartime sexual enslavement of women. The bill also calls on the U.S. Secretary of State to encourage Japan to address the issues raised in the resolution. Comfort women euphemistically refers to women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during the Second World War. An estimated 200,000 women, mostly Korean, are known to have been abused as sex slaves by Japanese troops in the early 20th century. The bill will be taken to the White House for President Barack Obama's signature on Friday. Despite such an unprecedented call from the U.S. to apologize, some Japanese politicians are going in the opposite direction. A group of Japanese lawmakers who claim a comfort woman statue erected in the U.S. city of Glendale should be removed stormed into Glendale City Hall on Thursday to file a complaint. City officials, however, refused to meet them, saying there was no reason to remove the statue as it was built for humanitarian reasons. But the Japanese group didn't stop here. They waved Japanese flags and took pictures in front of a statue to the shock of passers-by. Attention is now focused on how the Japanese government will react following Washington's passing of the bill. 한다은, 아리랑 뉴스.
The government is going all out to stimulate investment through bold deregulation efforts in key service segments.
And with President Park committed to inspect and carry out deregulation herself by presiding over a newly launched ministerial meeting for deregulation, all eyes are on whether the move would help facilitate investment.
To tell us more about the regulatory reform in the country, we bring in Dr. Song Won-gun, Director of Public Policy Research Division at Korea Economic Research Institute. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Dr. Song, this year the government is set to go back to the drawing room and re-examine the investment-related regulations and remove all unnecessary ones. Can you tell us what they're referring to here?
Okay, so the regulations that limit investments are usually the entry barrier regulations and land use regulations, and then especially for the service sector regulation. But the regulations are main obstacles for the development and growth of the service sector. You know, compared to manufacturing, the productivity of service sector is relatively low and stagnant. The reason is that regulations, especially the regulations that cause high entry barriers, restrain the expansion of the market, and then, you know, health-related services and educational services, tourism, financial services, like that. These are the major service sectors that can create high value-added services and create more jobs. But in these sectors, there are numerous regulations, and especially create high entry barriers. For instance, only people who has licenses can start and operate businesses, and those are the main obstacles for creating or increasing investments. So the government is focusing on repealing these kind of regulations.
Another specific measure announced by the government involves regulation quotas. What exactly is a regulation quota, and how would it stimulate investment?
Okay, this implies that government will monitor and abide by the total number of regulations. It is similar to one-in, one-out system, which is working in the United Kingdom recently. So in order for the government to implement new regulation, it needs to repeal one other regulations. So, but right now, the plan of the current government is a little bit different from this system. The government has a plan to give a different weight to each regulation, and then you can calculate and monitor the weighted total number of regulations, and that is the method the government will adopt for controlling the total number of regulations.
So with this regulation reform, is that enough to stimulate investment, or are there other measures that need to happen at the same time?
You know, taxation system should be restructured to encourage investments. So the government has been, right now the government has been trying to increase tax revenue for covering the increasing welfare expenditure by raising corporate and personal income taxes. But it will discourage investments and employment. So also, public sector reform is needed, because inefficiencies in the public sector will misallocate resources and then inhibit economic growth. And these should be, the reforms for these sectors should be complemented for the successful reform.
I see. So if all goes well, would Korea be able to reach President Park Geun-hye's goal of reaching 4% growth, 70% employment rate, and per capita income of $40,000?
You know, if these reforms are successful, I think that it might be possible for attaining 4% growth rate and eventually 40,000 personal income for the Korean economy. But I think that 70% of employment rate is very hard to attain, hard to be attained. But anyway, if these reforms are successful, and then the Park Geun-hye administration will have a kind of economic innovation and spur economic growth in Korea.
All right, Professor Song, thank you so much for your insight and time tonight.
All right, thank you very much.
before your day ends and another begins. Get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features restrictions is on the rise. Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report. Less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on to news are trying to cover up the South's true intentions. In local politics, 3 sitting lawmakers have lost their seats in Korea's parliament after the Supreme Court on Thursday found them guilty of illegal electioneering. This means more work for the rival parties as they will need to gear up for a by-election set for July on top of local elections in June. Our Kim Hyun-ji reports.
It was the last thing Korea's major political parties wanted. But with the removal of 3 lawmakers on Thursday, by-elections will have to be held. The lawmakers told to clear their desks were found guilty of illegal electioneering ahead of the 2012 general elections. One of the 3 was a proportional representative, which means the person next in line on the ruling party's proportional representation ticket will automatically assume her position. But the constituencies previously represented by the 2 other lawmakers will have to elect a new lawmaker in July. At least 6 other lawmakers face the possibility of losing their seats on similar illegal electioneering charges and are awaiting the Supreme Court's final verdict. Political watchers say the shakeup means up to 15 seats could be up for grabs for the July by-election. By-elections are usually held twice a year in April and in October. But this year, the first by-election should be held on July 30th. This is because of a special provision that says a by-election should be held the first Wednesday that falls 50 days after local elections. This means, theoretically, that Korea will have 3 elections in the span of 5 months. The June 4th local elections, a by-election on July 30th, and another by-election on October 29th. The rival parties agree that they should reduce the number of elections from the current 3 to 2, but they differ on how to go about it. The ruling Saenuri Party says the June local elections and the July by-election should be combined and held together in June. But the main opposition Democratic Party says the 2 by-elections should be combined and held in October. The rival parties have agreed to discuss the matter next week at the Special Parliamentary Committee to Reform Politics. Although both parties say their proposal is the best to reduce administrative costs and voter fatigue, pundits say their own political interests have certainly been taken into consideration. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
Samsung's presence in the global market is on the rise. The electronics giant has made the top 10 list of popular brands in 12 out of 15 countries, according to market researcher YouGov. The survey, which is based on whether respondents have heard anything positive or negative about a company, showed that Samsung was considered the most popular brand in Saudi Arabia. The company took second place in countries like China and Germany. YouGov attributed the company's rising global presence to its campaigns last year surrounding the launches of the Galaxy S4 smartphone and the NX Android camera. In the last of our 5-part series on Korea's industrial competitiveness, we delve into the once red-hot smartphone market. And although it's been showing signs of slower growth, the information technology industry is set to explore new frontiers this year. Our Yu Lian has more on these up-and-coming trends.
2014 will be the year when wearable technology takes off. Samsung burst onto the smartwatch scene last year.
Hey, pretty ladies.
But the electronic giant's tagline haven't really worked with consumers. The company recently rolled out an upgraded Galaxy Gear smartwatch that allows users to control home appliances by remote. And with the Apple iWatch and Google Glass due to hit shelves this year, the stage has been set for a fierce competition to win consumers over with the latest wearable gadgets.
We need to build our own software for wearables. While Samsung's smartwatch is powered by Google Android, Google Glass uses its own software.
Korean companies are also jumping into another hot battleground this year, the so-called IoT market, or Internet of Things, connecting objects to objects. Take this service, for example. press a button on your smartphone and your car engine starts. If someone tries to break into your car, an alarm goes off in the car and on your smartphone.
By combining our IoT technology and a car servicing company, we've created a new service that allows you to monitor your car wherever you are.
Now, there's a familiar area in which electronics companies will try to make a comeback, and that's TVs. Ultra-high-definition TVs, to be exact. Ultra HD TVs offer 4 times the resolution of regular HD TVs, and the technology is expected to be the main driver of TV sales this year, especially with the upcoming Winter Olympics and World Cup. IT products by Samsung and other Korean companies were major contributors to the Korean economy in 2013.
Exports of IT products reached a record high last year, making up nearly a third of the country's overall exports. But Korea faces new challenges this year, with smartphones no longer considered a safe cash cow. The big question is, will Korean players remain as movers and shakers of the industry? Yurian, Arirang News.
As some of the world's top golfers took center stage at the European Tour's second event of the year.
Stephen Shea joins us for the details on that and more from the world of golf and other sports. Stephen.
Hey guys, several high-profile names packed up their clubs for the HSBC Golf Championship in Abu Dhabi, where 2 of the biggest, Phil Mickelson and Rory McIlroy, was grouped with defending champion Jamie Donaldson. All 3, while not on top of the leaderboard, are projected to make the cut at the end of the second round. Meanwhile, round 1 action at the PGA Tour's Humana Challenge in California has Patrick Reed in first. Wee Chang-soo, tied for 6th at 7 under, leads all of the South Koreans in the tournament. Now heading to the Australian Open, the world's #1 Serena Williams has propelled herself into round 4 as well as the history books. Blazing by her opponent Daniela Hantuchova, she earned her record 61st win at the Blue Courts in Melbourne. The 5-time Australian Open champion is looking to add her first trophy there since 2010. Now moving on, the South Korean men's national football team manager Hong Myung-bo said that all things are possible with his team. That was in response to a reporter's question about whether there's a chance superstar Park Ji-sung could play in the March friendly versus Greece. And while he said that he'd meet with Park to talk about it, it's more likely that the former captain will stay on the sidelines. And shifting gears to badminton, the South Korean duo of Lee Yong-dae and Yoo Yeon-sung made their way into the quarterfinals at the Malaysia Open. At the BWF Super Series Premium event, they defeated the Indonesian team 22-20 and 21-16 to advance. The pair, seeking their first win of 2014, has won 3 tournaments since joining forces in October last year. Now it's the KBL. KGC beat Dongbu 80-63 in the first of a doubleheader. But let's get to the game of the night. The SK Knights took on the Mobis Phoebus in Ulsan. Now the league's top teams start on fire, but Mobis takes the big lead into the half. SK rallies back and leads into the 4th quarter, but Rod Benson's free throws sends it to OT. There, SK finds the steam to close it out, beating Mobis 91-86. And that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
We got off to a smoggy start to the day here in Seoul, but things cleared up by the afternoon just in time for the weekend.
That's right. For more, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, hello.
Good evening, guys. This morning, some parts of Seoul saw fine dust readings jump to 6 times the normal levels. However, the warning was called off at 4 p.m. in Seoul. As for this weekend, the weather looks to be perfect for outdoor activities as temperatures will remain in the seasonal average range with clear skies, and snow is forecast for Monday, which will hopefully take care of the dry conditions. Taking a look at the current conditions, the nation is at the edge of a high-pressure system from China, which is why we're seeing clouds move in. Now, although the fine dust has cleared out of Seoul, the southern regions will continue to have high levels through later tonight, so those of you with respiratory problems must take caution. Looking ahead at tomorrow's readings, Seoul starts off the day at -5 degrees with a high of 2. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Busan hit 5 and 7 degrees respectively. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon peaks at 2 degrees while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang top out at 3 and -5 degrees respectively. Hope you have a wonderful Friday night, but I'll see you again after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.